All right, guys, let's get started tonight. Just a quick reminder, we do record these episodes. So if you would like to take your video off, and don't want your face popping up or anything, it's usually just one in the top corner. So it's not a huge thing, but just something to be aware of. And with that, let's get started. Welcome to Talk, Taste, and Travel. This is our weekly Wine Down Wednesday event where myself, Kristen Sandvig, founder of LIONHOUND Travel, and Adele Corrigan from 13 Celsius travel the world with you guys virtually through the lens of wine. Adele, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what's happening at 13 right now? I know you guys just reopened.
Yeah, it's good to see everyone again this week. So we are in our second week of reopening, which is really nice. There was an announcement today that the governor has given the go-ahead to reopen bars starting October 14th. So that's like brand new news as of like a couple hours ago. But we did secure a restaurant permit, so it doesn't really do anything for us if the bars do get shut down again. We have the go-ahead. So it's been
Guys
busy.
are here to stay.
Yeah, it's been nice and busy. So hopefully, if you guys haven't been by to come by and support and check us out and stuff like that, it's great. You can also now come pick up your wines for the week and have a glass while you're there. Something that we haven't been able to do for a very long time.
I love it. I can't wait till I'm back and get to enjoy a glass in person with you again and with some of our weekly guests. So with that, let's get started. Tonight we are off to Argentina. And I am so excited to be heading to this beautiful country. This was one of the last international trips that I took before the pandemic. And as you guys know, Argentina's in the southern hemisphere. And so this is the perfect place to get away during the North American winter so that you can experience an eternal summer. The country is full of surprises with a long list of world-class tourist attractions, the spectacular glaciers, remarkable deserts, picturesque mountains, stunning sea coasts, and impressive volcanoes make this country one that's full of natural beauty. It's huge. And while it's easy enough to plan overland trips within the individual provinces, that's something that's actually super popular because there are so many scenic drives. But its vast size and natural barriers make it most easily visited by air travel. And as the world's fifth largest wine producer and the 10th largest wine exporter, the country has emerged as an important staple in the global wine economy. Its vineyards are mostly confined to the western sector of the country in the plains and foothills near the Andes, where they experience a continental climate. Old cellars have been rejuvenated, glamorous new ones have been built by investors, and new vineyards are being planted ever higher in the Andes Mountains, where we have some of the highest altitude vineyards in the world. So, with that, let's visit some of these wine regions. And Adele, why don't you give us an overall, tell us a little bit overall about Argentina as a wine producing region and what some of the key destinations that we'll be visiting and drinking from are today.
Yeah, this is definitely like the close up of all of the wine producing areas in the different colors there on that map. But if you really think about it, this is still like the northern half of Argentina. When you get past Patagonia in the south, I mean, you're just getting, it's too cold, it's too rocky, you're too close to Antarctica, and it's just not habitable to cultivate vines. As Kristen had just said before, Argentina, it's the fifth largest wine producer in the world, and that's a lot. I think that almost everyone here is familiar with Argentine malbec or some sort of Argentinian wine in some capacity. Like it's not an unfamiliar term to them. But some of the different regions that we're going to explore today, I think might be something new. Our first wine starts in the north, then we're going to go all the way down south, and then we're going to come back into the middle. But some interesting things just overall about Argentine wine producing regions is that they're all kind of in the foothills of the Andes. As you can see where that kind of spine divides Chile and Argentina, and Argentina lays in the rain shadow effect. So it's a very dry area, and all of the snow melt from the Andes sort of comes down, and these canals and trenches were kind of dug originally by some of the Incas to help provide water to other areas where they've cultivated different either produce or trees or green things that they're growing, and other plants and stuff like that. And so now they use that today as well to help irrigate the vineyards that are in some of like the different drier areas and parts of the world, or of Argentina. The other fun thing about all of the areas, specifically like in Mendoza, is that it's also pretty windy as well. So if you are planning on a trip to any of the wine regions, there's a couple things you should probably pack with you, and that's like a windbreaker, shorts, and a sweater, because during the summertime, like, it still gets about 100 degrees, but then it's very, very windy. But then at night it cools down a lot. So you're in like high desert kind of area. Think about like if you've ever been to like Santa Fe, New Mexico, kind of where it's like hot during the day, but then it gets pretty cold at night. Some of those higher altitude vineyards in some of the main wine producing areas are there. So a few different grapes that you'll find along your way, and we're gonna touch on a few of these today, but the main one, of course, is Malbec. After that, you'll find Cab, Merlot, Syrah, even a little bit of Tempranillo. And another grape that most people probably haven't heard of before, called Bonarda, and that's surprisingly the second most planted red grape in Argentina. But for some reason, we don't really get to see a lot of quality examples here in the United States. If it's around here, like, I mean, I've seen a couple of them, but it's definitely not as popular as Malbec. And then if you're gonna see some white wines, the most planted grape is called Pedro Jimenez, which is different than Pedro Jimenez from Spain. But usually this version of it, this is just made for bulk wines, and not really made for like quality production. Another white grape that you'll see Chardonnay, you'll see Chenin Blanc, and then you'll see a very distinctive, special floral style white wine called Torrontés, which we'll get into as our first wine of the evening. Another interesting thing is that a lot of the vineyards and a lot of the wine producing areas, they're far removed from any major metropolitan cities. So unlike in Santiago, Chile, just across the mountains there's a lot of pollution that surround the vineyards. Here in Argentina, you're pretty far away. So I know that we're flying into Argentina, but where are we going to start off, Kristen?
So since we're departing from the United States tonight, our first stop is going to be Buenos Aires. And it is no secret that Buenos Aires is the cosmopolitan hub of South America. It exudes this graceful infusion of European and Latin American culture. And this city, famous for popularizing the tango, is often referred to as the Paris of South America. The city's neighborhoods are hip, historic, chic, and colorful, from the hipster vibes of Palermo to the historic charm of San Telmo. You'll be spoilt with an array of cozy abodes around the city. And it's a lively city with a buzzing nightlife and has a super cool cafe culture. And it's really easy to navigate and meet people. You'll start your visit to South America today, visiting the city of Buenos Aires and enjoying the sensual moves of professional dancers at a tango show. You can watch the show, or you can try your hand and your hips if you're feeling confident enough about that. You can stroll along Avenida Libertador, browse the boutiques of Avenida Alvear, and take an architectural tour of Avenida de Mayo, where French-inspired Beaux Arts buildings flank the boulevard. And you can't miss the famous Recoleta Cemetery, where you can visit the resting place of Eva Perón and other notable figures. As the international gateway to the country, this is going to be where any trip is starting within Argentina. And like we said, it's a huge country. So Buenos Aires is going to be where you fly in and out of to get to any of these other regions, because they aren't very easy to connect together. When we're in Buenos Aires, I wanted to share a few hotels that really exemplify the different personalities of the city. So the first property we have is the Four Seasons, and this property is absolutely beautiful and has amazing views. It's vibrant and lively and offers an Argentine gourmet experience in their famous restaurants and bars. They welcome savvy globetrotters to a new level of luxury and service. This is the only hotel in the fashionable Recoleta district, close to businesses, shopping, and cultural diversions with a heated outdoor pool. And you can choose a contemporary room with the latest modern comforts or an elegant 20th century French mansion style abode. Legado Mitico is another property that I absolutely love. It's a boutique hotel in the famous Palermo neighborhood that fuses modern expressions with full comfort. This is the perfect place to experience Argentina's history and culture in rooms inspired by the universe of emblematic characters from politics, art, music, and literature. Enjoy a refined and exclusive experience with an attention to service and detail. And being in the Palermo neighborhood, this hidden gem is perfectly located to explore the colorful streets and buzzing coffee culture of the area. The dark leathers and masculine tones make it my favorite pick for father-son trips and for guys' trips before they head off to Cordoba for some dove hunting. Then the last property I wanted to share with you is Estancia La Bamba de Areco. So this property is actually an hour outside of Buenos Aires, but it is a Relais and Chateau property, and a long avenue lined with plane trees lead to the colonial style building, which features 11 rooms adorned with dark woods and local artwork and textiles. You can go biking, you can enjoy a hot stone massage, or you can do a mate tea tasting and watch the gauchos display their equestrian skills or join a trail ride. This property has stables there, and it is actually it's Argentina's, the official hotel of Argentina's polo team. And they have some amazing horse experiences here. So with that being said, there is a theme that we're going to see with the places that we visit, both in a where to stay and where to eat kind of perspective. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Relais and Chateau, because we typically talk about hotels that have this designation, but not everybody might know exactly what that means. So like Michelin's restaurant ratings, this hotel organization began in France, and it has a high concentration of European properties. But in the past several years, they've expanded across the globe and are all over the Americas and in many other places as well. While considered a label, Relais and Chateau is actually a guarantor of good practices as compared to haute couture. And in order to be a part of the Relais and Chateau family, you can't just meet the criteria for excellence. Candidates must share core values, a local focus, humanity, sharing, and commitment. And the cuisine is also a major criterion when considering new members. The hotels are typically warm, welcoming places where guests really feel at home. They tend to be a little bit more boutique in style than some of the major luxury brands that many of us are familiar with. And they're places that have their own roots, history, and attachment to a particular territory, whether it's the Napa Valley vineyards in French Provence, or the beaches in the Indian Ocean, or in Patagonia, Mendoza, Salta, and Buenos Aires. So one of the primary goals is to inspire guests with regards to the quality of the cuisine and allow different culinary cultures the opportunity to fully express their creativity. So if you ever see this fleur-de-lis on the facade of a hotel you're visiting, you know that the food is going to be top-notch and you're staying in a place that's really connected to the environment where you're visiting. So with that, Adele, why don't we dive into the specific regions we're visiting today and tell us just kind of an overview about Salta, Patagonia, and Mendoza, and what stands out about the grapes that are coming from each of the regions that we're featuring today.
So if you haven't already pulled all of your wines out, these are the three that we're going to be tasting today from Argentina. And the first one will be the Torrontés, which is going to be, we're going to start in the very far north in the region of Salta, which is known for Torrontés. After that, we're actually going to go all the way down to like the most southern wine growing part of Argentina, which is Patagonia. And this is an excellent example of one of the best Pinot Noir producers in the entire country. And then after that, we're going to finish with the Malbec blend in Mendoza, Argentina, which has been, I can't even think of how many people have said that this is one of like the best producers from Mendoza that make really good quality wines that are not necessarily like your typical over extracted examples. They are great wines that have a sense of place. And I'm very, very excited. And we have a special guest who's going to be helping us talk about the carousel from Mendoza today. Very excited.
Well, with that, let's hop on our plane and touch down in our first destination today. When Argentinians want to see a different side of their own country, Salta is where they go. And this is a land full of contrasts. There are towering red rock formations and lush green valleys that are home to some of the world's highest altitude vineyards, like Adele said. The lovely town of Cafayate makes an excellent base for exploring what the area has to offer in terms of both wine and adventure. And it's the perfect place to sample the Salta province's iconic empanadas and immerse yourself in the cultural traditions that have inspired generations of musicians and poets. The bodegas surrounding Cafayate are relatively close together, making it easy to cover more ground in a shorter period of time. Several of these bodegas can even be found in and around the town itself. So you can sip and stroll by foot or rent a bike to leisurely make your way from vineyard to vineyard. Salta, the city, is different than Salta, the province. So you're likely arriving here and you'll explore this colonial town before heading to Cafayate. And the drive from Salta to Cafayate is one of the main attractions of the Salta province. So as we depart, so we'll check into our hotel first, and there is an ethereal movie set ethos around House of Jasmines. This is another RELAIS Chateau property, and it's perhaps the elegant 100-year-old estancia set in the foothills of the Andes. It is the former home of actor Robert Duvall. It's surrounded by fragrant jasmine, wild orchids, and roses, with the grand main house totally re-envisioned. With only 14 suites furnished in shabby chic decor, cowhide rugs, and exquisite antiques, it truly embodies that sense of place that's characteristic of these RELAIS Chateau properties. The restaurant serves hearty Argentine fare. You can grab a comfy seat in front of the massive fireplace. You'll also find a pool, horse paddock, spa, and nearly 250 acres of parks and gardens to explore. Whether you're taking a romantic short trip or a relaxing spa weekend, a family vacation, or an adventure with friends, all of these occasions are ideal for staying at House of Jasmines, and this is one of the most beautiful properties in the area. So with that, let's start our drive through the Salta province and take off along the route that follows Rio de las Conchas, which is River of the Shells. And the drive is absolutely beautiful and takes you through lots of these really well-known rock formations. So it's probably one of the most stunning roads in the world, and it can be completed within 3 hours, but it's really worth taking the time to fully appreciate in the landscape. You'll probably want to stop every 5 minutes to take photos. And the next stop along the river takes you to Quebrada de las Conchas, which is the canyon of the Shells, or the Shells Ravine. And you'll see these intensely colored rock formations, wild landscapes of multicolored sandstone, and majestic mountains dotted with lush green cacti. Also along the way, there's a ghost town called Alemania, where you can still see the old train station and train depot from the early 20th century. Garganta del Diablo, the Devil's Throat, is one of the most famous rock formations along Route 68. El Anfiteatro, excuse my accent, guys, is a vast natural amphitheater with great acoustics, which is kind of like a Red Rocks in Colorado, if you're familiar with that venue, where musicians will go to perform, and it's a cool stop along the way. Quebrada de Cafayate is another canyon that you'll find as we get closer to the main town of Cafayate, and the formations start to change, and you see these little pillars of rocks starting to pop up, and you can see a little bit more green starting to make its way into this photo as we start to approach that a little more lush wine region. And then we finally arrive in Cafayate, where we're ready to open this Tarantas and dive in and learn a little bit more about our first wine of the day. So Adele, why don't you lead the tour to Anco, and let's crack this bottle.
So other than the drive being absolutely gorgeous too, like right around in this area is where they have the huge cacti as well, like the 30-foot tall, like looks like a person with arms cactus and like all sorts of different forests and stuff, which is, I think, really cool to see. And just that juxtaposition of just like these jagged, rough mountains with this weird forest. And then all of a sudden now we have vineyards and like really cool wineries. And we're at, you know, high altitudes. Even though the region of Salta itself has a little less than 3,000 total hectares under vines, the reputation for high quality Tarantas is gaining. This varietal itself as a grape is normally prone to really high alcohol levels and being kind of imbalanced, but in the region of Salta, specifically Cafayate, it has a really good balance with the diurnal shift that happens, which is that hot during the day, cold at night, really helps with like even ripening of the grapes, and helps to balance out that alcohol content as well. So another really promising winery, if you were to visit other than Anco, is that Susana Balbo, her Crios is from here. So if you've ever had Tarantas before, it's most likely been Susana Balbo's Crios. It's like the widely exported hallmark of Tarantas style. And this is also where Anco is from, this region and stuff like that as well. So if you've ever had the Crios, the Anco will be pretty similar in that one as well, or to that wine as well. But Anco means high water in the native language of Salta. And it's sort of like in reference to being in this oasis of all of like the beautiful vineyards that are around you, but also like the cacti and stuff like that. Just kind of like, you know, that balance of like extreme mountains. And as I mentioned earlier, the juxtaposition of just like the jagged, rough rocks, but then you have this green, lush environment in this one little area. And the vineyard itself is in Estancia Los Cardones, and it's named after those cactus that we talked about earlier, those big, you know, 30-foot ones. This Tarantas, I think, shows a considerable amount more complexity than other versions of Tarantas. I think the texture on this wine is really interesting. Tarantas itself is an aromatic white wine, and it really originated in Argentina. It's very floral, like petals and white peaches and lemon zest. I've oftentimes compared Tarantas to like when you are walking into the Galleria, but you have to walk through like a Neiman Marcus to get in, and it's just you're being spritzed with perfume like your entire first, you know, 50 yards to get into the mall. I think of like department store perfume shop when I think of Tarantas. But it really is like this signifying characteristic that people seek out when you have good quality Tarantas. Like other grapes that are also high aromatics, like are like Moscato or Riesling or something like that, but the major difference between these is that this wine smells like it's going to be sweet, and you taste it and it's bone dry, and that's the intention, is that you want Tarantas to be dry in style, and it makes really sort of interesting wines and fun wines that can pair with a different variety of foods and stuff like that as well.
Those are my favorite types of whites, Adele, which I'm sure everybody here knows by now. I love those super aromatic floral whites that are bone dry, but I love that sweetness on the nose. So you mentioned food that goes with this wine. Tell us a little bit about what you would pair with it.
So this wine, I thought was kind of something that's a little bit different. Like I know we always default to Asian and Indian foods, but something in particular, any Thai dish that has a coconut curry base to it, like that coconut and fresh crushed herbs like basil, will complement like the floral aromatics like really, really nicely. Like this is your coconut curry #1 pairing. But there's also some cool Argentinian foods that I thought that we would also maybe just chat about for a second. And in this picture, is this the cheese thing?
This is the provoleta. And we shared a recipe with you guys from Food and Wine to make a provoletta with tomatoes and oregano. And this is a traditional dish. And so if you guys know much about Argentine food, you know it's super meat heavy. And even with the white wines, we're looking at heavier dishes that accompany them. And so I thought this was one of those wines that could probably go well a little bit with some of the tomato that's incorporated in there and some of the cheese. What do you think, Adele?
I mean, like other things, I think when I think of Argentinian food, like besides like the grilled meats and stuff like that, is like chimichurri sauce, which is, you know, herbal and aromatic, and you can put that on anything if you are a vegetarian. Like you can put it on vegetables, you can put it on grilled pieces of bread as well. And I think that would also be kind of a fun pairing with the Tarantas as well.
For sure. That's a good one. And I mean, besides steak, what would you eat with chimichurri?
Well, I know you mentioned that the empanada was like something that if you go to Salta, you have to try. So I think that would also be super fun because, you know, an empanada is like that, like wrapped in bread and sort of like baked, and you can put all sorts of different stuffings on the inside. It's like a crusty, crumbly turnover. I mean, you could put spinach and corn, or you could put chicken and beef in there and cheese. But I think that like an empanada would be really cool too. And I know I mentioned Phoenicia Market the last time that we had this episode as like a really cool place, but they do empanadas over there fresh as well.
I love it. So now you guys know if you opened this wine tonight, or if you're saving it for later, that's where you can go to grab some empanadas and some chimichurri sauce to enjoy with it. Or if you make your own, then even better, save it for a special occasion. Well, Adele, let's hop on a plane, and depending on the day of the week, we're either heading straight down to Patagonia, to El Calafate, or we'll have to have a quick layover in Buenos Aires before making our way down to Patagonia. So as we land in Patagonia, it's important to know that Patagonia and the Lake District often get lumped together as one big region that people will call Patagonia. And the Argentinian Lakes region, or Los Lagos, is a beautiful area of rolling mountains, lush green valleys, and it's punctuated by deep blue frigid lakes. The region north of Patagonia is, like I said, often combined with the southern part of the region. And Ushuaia is actually at the very tip of Patagonia, and that is the most southern point of the South American continent before you start getting into the little islands. And it's the access point for Tierra del Fuego, the land of the fire, and that's where you're departing to take your trips down to Antarctica. To give you guys a little bit of perspective, this is a 28-hour drive by car to Bariloche, which kind of bookends the northern ends of Patagonia. And the major city of El Calafate is 20 hours from Bariloche. We'll touch on some of the highlights of visiting Argentina's true Patagonia region, because it really is someplace that can't be missed when you're visiting this country. The wine growing part of Patagonia is actually closer to the more temperate Los Lagos along the Rio Negro. And Argentina's Lake District is synonymous with the outdoors. There are many things to do in Bariloche that could keep you busy for more than a week, everything from hiking, biking, rafting, and even camping if you want to get that experience. It's really a destination for every season, and there's fantastic skiing in the winter, and the long summer days are best spent hiking, driving, and relaxing by the lake shores. The Nahual Huapi National Park is which is best explored by car. And we'll talk about one of the exciting scenic drives in Argentina's Lake District in a little bit. So with that, let's start in El Calafate at the southern most point of our trip today. And so the hotel we'll check into in El Calafate is one of my bucket list hotels. Aolo is a remote relay and chateau lodge, and it's a true escape surrounded by the wild and natural beauty of Argentine Patagonia. It embodies the spirit of the region with indigenous roots and the personal experiences of the first European and Criollo settlers, and those of the adventurers from across the world who still head for this legendary land today. This magical lodge stretches over 4,000 hectares near El Calafate on the route to Perito Moreno Glacier, which is one of the key attractions in the region. Here in the Valley of La Anita, nothing can disturb this tranquility. And if you see that picture in the top photo, you might notice a few birds that are in the water, and they're pretty small, but these are flamingos. So the views from this lodge overlooks this lake, and this is something that's super cool about this part of Patagonia. You can actually see flamingos in the wild, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But at the heart of the Windstep Step, the Aola Patagonia spirit is committed to having a very low environmental impact by melting into the landscape. It only has 17 suites and allows nature to absorb tourism without leaving a negative pack on the environment. The decoration of each suite pays tribute to the different species of local fauna, and a large library offers many books for those curious about the historical and natural heritage of the region. Guests can set off and explore unspoilt nature, relax in the indoor pool, and savor delicious cuisine while taking in the incredible views of glaciers, the largest lake in Argentina, and the Andes Mountains. You cannot visit El Calafate and not visit Perito Moreno. It's worth spending an entire day here, and it's probably one of Argentina's most impressive sites. Whilst you can certainly visit the glacier with the tour, you can also do it on your own independently. And another hugely popular experience involves strapping on a pair of crampons and summiting the glacier itself. And as I mentioned before, if you're a bit of a twitcher, or simply just want to see flamingos in the wild, the Laguna Jimenez Reserve should definitely be on your to-do list. This is a 2.5 kilometer self-guided trail that has various lookout spots where you can see the different birds without disturbing them. Next, we'll head north and check into the super remote Estancia Cristina as we make our way up to El Chalten, which is another super popular part of Argentine Patagonia. This is at the far end of the Cristina Channel on the northwest coast of Lake Argentino. It stands on a remote corner of Los Glaciares National Park. It was founded in 1914 by Joseph Percival Masters and his wife Jessie, and it still conserves the essence of keeping the history of the pioneering family alive, who through enormous effort and perseverance turned this inhospitable and solitary place into a small piece of paradise. It's accessible only by boat, and the transfer to get to this property is unlike any you'll take anywhere else in the world. It stands on an exclusive and privileged setting in the Argentine Patagonia. It was strategically built on a glacial valley formerly occupied by the Uppsala Glacier, and it's one of the region's most spectacular natural settings. It's surrounded by picturesque views of snow-capped mountains, lakes, rivers, and hanging glaciers. And to give you an idea of what your transfer in looks like, this is it. You see the Uppsala Glacier that has receded where it used to be where the hotel is now. And just the ride in alone is an experience in itself. Imagine these towering bodies of ice just looking over you as you make your way into the property. And then once you've checked in, you can visit Los Glaciares National Park by the traditional way that you do at an estancia, on horseback. You can do trekking in the region, but if you're brave enough to ride horses for a full day, you can cover a lot more ground and a lot more comfortably. It still can be physically draining, but this is a really amazing way to get that authentic Patagonia experience. Then as we head north, El Chalten, this peak, is one of the icons of Patagonia. The town of El Chalten itself is more of a backpacker town, and it's really great for basing there and doing some out and back hikes, or if you are a little bit more intrepid, you can actually tackle a loop that lasts 3 or 4 days around the peak, staying in refugios. And serious rock and ice climbers can even make a summit bid. From there, we'll continue our journey north into the Lake District in the northern part of Patagonia. And the last inhabitable lands before the South Pole, Patagonia does fascinate everyone who comes here. And Las Balsas, another Relais and Chateau property, is undoubtedly one of the most beautiful places to stay in this far-flung part of the world. This photo at the top, you see this beautiful pool on property, and you can see in the window the reflection of the lake beyond. You can take a romantic boat ride, venture out canoeing or on horseback, or just relax and be pampered in the soothing and revitalizing spa overlooking Nahuel Huapi Lake. And a perfect day with a meal in the first-class restaurant where sophisticated dishes using local produce will delight the palate. And the blue facade fits in so perfectly with the landscape. It looks like a private home that is situated on the lake rather than a hotel. And that's something that I think is really special about Relais and Chateau and about so many of the properties that you visit in Argentina, just the way they are incorporated so seamlessly into the land. So from here, we have a little bit more sightseeing to do before we make our way to wine country. And Nahuel Huapi National Park is one of the main attractions. You can kayak, canoe, bike ride, horse ride, or go for a swim. And exploring the area by car is a must. In the far north of Argentine Patagonia, the famous Ruta de los Siete Lagos, or the Route of the Seven Lakes, traces a winding path through an epic landscape of sweeping, multi-hued forests, towering peaks, and scenic lakes. This landscape is a seventh heaven for the outdoor adventurer. And one thing that is actually amazing is you can do this scenic route, parts of it, in a day. The route actually runs the length of Argentina and South America, and it's one of the longest roads in the world. It starts at the very south of Argentina and then cuts a path for more than 5,000 kilometers, passing through Argentine Patagonia before continuing on north to the border with Bolivia. But the 180-kilometer stretch is one of the most scenic drives. And it's a winding lake and mountain road between the pretty lakeside towns of Villa La Angostura and San Martín de los Andes in Argentina's Lake District. This is the perfect way to see so much of the most naturally beautiful parts of the country and of this particular region without having to spend too much energy and to save your legs for some of the more intense hikes in Salta and southern Patagonia. So we'll head east along the Rio Negro and make our way to Bodegas CHACRA BARDA and tackle our second wine of the day. So Adele, why don't you tell us a little bit about this wine and what really stands out about it? This is a super cool one.
After our little trip through the mountains and stuff like that, like I was just thinking about that chef table episode in like the first season where they go to Patagonia. And I just looked it up. It's season 1, episode 3. So this is everyone's homework for tonight. Watch this episode. It's with Chef Francis Mallman, who lives like remotely in southern Patagonia. If you haven't seen it before, it's absolutely fantastic of just like how he sources and forages for certain ingredients to do like his like Michelin star crazy high-end restaurant, literally in the middle of nowhere lives on this little island in the middle of everything. You have to take like a boat that comes like once a week to get there or some crazy things like that. You know, wine isn't the only thing that Argentinians like to drink. And I just wanted to touch on this too, because like if you are going to go out and about and like you might be greeted with something other than wine, and you're most likely going to get a cocktail, and it's called Fernet and Coca-Cola. Literally, Fernet Branca, whoever's familiar with those knows it. It's a very like bitter and strong herbal liqueur that's normally from Italy. And it's like a more strong version of Jägermeister. And they mix it with Coca-Cola with ice. And surprisingly, it's very simple because it's just 2 ingredients, but the texture of like the black licorice and like the inkiness of the Fernet and then like the bubbles and like the sweet caramel and vanilla notes of Coke actually makes it like a complicated, interesting thing. But it is the #1 drink of Argentina. And the other one is if you wanted a beer, Quilmes, just like the Argentinian lager they're very, very proud of. So those are kind of...
Don't want alcohol. There is mate, which is a tea that's super famous to the area as well. So Argentina's beverage culture is, they really do have something for everyone.
Yeah. So if we're talking about wine though, and we're going all the way down south to Patagonia, Pinot Noir really seems to excel in this region. And, you know, there's, in the southern hemisphere, if we were to like draw a line, Patagonia kind of lines up also with Tasmania and the North Island of New Zealand. And I know we've kind of covered New Zealand before as well, and also tried a Pinot Noir kind of from that area. And there seems to be just like this like band in the southern hemisphere of areas where Pinot Noir can grow really, really well. And I think it's just because it's this cooler climate, so you've got a longer growing season, and the wines are more elegant. Pinot Noir is very finicky, and really needs like a cooler place to grow, and different soil types and stuff like that as well. So here you'll find more elegant styles of malbec. If you were to drink a malbec from down here, it's not going to be those big, powerful examples like from the northern parts of like Mendoza and stuff like that. So here we find bodegas CHACRA. Everyone's kind of maybe heard of the word chakras, those like vital energy centers and like points in like your body that help you to, or depending on if you believe in this or not, to connect with the whole universe. But a chakra in Patagonia is also the name for a piece of land that's destined to pomology, which is the science of growing fruit. So they believe that this area was supposed to have fruit on it, and grapes are a fruit. The other really interesting about this property is that this is spearheaded by the family behind Sassicaia in Tuscany. So Sassicaia is a super duper duper famous super Tuscan. This is the grandson, Piero, of the man who invented Sassicaia. So of course they have oodles of money and started this project, and the grandson Piero wanted all of the vineyards to be biodynamic. And I know we've touched on this before about biodynamics and what exactly that means when it's in terms of viniculture. And I just wanted to share a couple of examples of things that you have to do in the vineyard to qualify, along with no pesticides, herbicides, or anything else, and just really having things become natural. But a lot of times you'll harvest and you'll do other things like pruning and trimming in accordance to like a farmer's almanac, depending on the position of the stars and the moon and the earth and where they are. But there's some other things, and they have this on their website, and it's a whole list of stuff. I just want to share like a couple of things, but they're biodynamic preparations that you have to do to the soil in order to get a different result in whatever product that you're growing. And one of which is the horn manure preparation. So you take the horn of a lactating cow and then you stuff it with the manure of that same cow. And then you bury it in the fall in the top layer of soil, and you leave it there for 6 months. And this preparation in particular has shown that the increase of soil bacteria, fungi, and earthworm activity is super strengthened, and also it helps with root growth. Another thing that's kind of crazy as well, and I won't get too deep into some of these because they sound kind of gross, but they'll take a stag's bladder and they'll stuff it with destemmed yarrow flowers, and they'll hang it in the sun during summer. Then in the winter, they'll bury it, and the result is that the sulfur and potassium levels in the soil are now better. So it's kind of crazy to think that like some of these things that are all natural actually have like a legit effect on helping to heal the soil underneath whatever product or plants that you're trying to grow. And this helps a lot with wine and stuff like that too. So as I mentioned before, that this is a project. It was founded in 2003 by Piero Rocchetta from Sassicaia, who fell in love with the property when he was at a tasting in New York City. And his attention was focused on the Rio Negro region of Patagonia in Argentina. And after his first visit, he basically knew that this was going to be his passion, and where he wanted to plant really cool Pinot Noir and a couple other vineyards. And specifically, he found this one region that was ungrafted, and the vines in some parts date back to 1932. So they're really, really old. There's also an interesting thing is that some of these vines are planted, the really old ones, on sandy soils. So a little while ago, maybe 100 years ago in some parts, there was phylloxera, which was a small root louse that ravaged almost all wine producing regions because it destroyed the root of the plant. It was discovered a cure to this was that you have to graft the vine onto American rootstock, and therefore the vine can grow from that rootstock and then be healthy, and it's resistant to the vineyards. Well, if you have sandy soil, phylloxera does not travel. It can't spread. It doesn't like that soil type. So therefore, you have your original rootstock, and you didn't lose a lot of your vines. So you'll find some of these older vines, and the result is that, you know, when you have old vines, the quality of fruit is so much better. You'll have less of it, but what you do have is very intensely flavored and really, really great quality. So Piero was super, enthused about this one project in Patagonia, and they purchased it, and they've been making wine since 2003. They have several different levels of their Pinot Noir. Today, we're going to be tasting the BARDA. The BARDA is from their youngest vineyards, but it was planted in 1990, so it's still, 30 something years of age. So it's not like super, super young. And it also on those sandy soils, so it has its original rootstock. I think that this wine is elegant. It has lower alcohol percentage on it. I think if you saw that on there is like 12 or 13%. I don't have the bottle in front of me today, unfortunately. But it's like a really, really amazing example of Pinot Noir. And I'm really curious to see how everyone else likes this wine, or how they would compare it to either any others that they've had from Patagonia or others just from Burgundy or Willamette Valley. Because this, to me, is, when I tasted it earlier, was one of the best examples of Patagonian Pinot Noir that you can find on the market.
Yeah, we would love to hear you guys, what you guys think about it. So if you want to type in the chat box and let us know just how it compares to some of those New Zealand and Willamette and French Pinot Noirs that you've tasted, that would be really cool. Adele, what would you eat with this wine?
So because this wine is a little bit lighter, and it almost has this like minty kind of thing to it, and it's, not a whole lot of French oak on it, although there is an oak presence to it, but it's not a lot of new oak. We can go like along different ways. I know you have a picture of of course, some of like the grilled poultry, but you could almost do like a heavy fish with this as well.
I love that. I love being able to find wines that are red and pair really well with seafood. But one of the reasons I wanted to kind of talk about the poultry that was unique to the area was there is this big like dove and quail and pheasant hunting kind of culture in central Argentina. And this seems like a wine that would go really well with just some of those lighter, not necessarily lighter, but some of those poultry dishes that are really unique to that have that sense of terroir as well. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to feature this with some fresh herbs. I think that would be just delicious.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, some of those like fresh herbs to kind of complement like the spearminty mintiness of the wine, and then you get that char from grilling meats that would balance really nicely with the Pinot and those like strong like red fruits, tart, cherry, cranberry kind of flavors as well.
Yeah, and we recommend barbecue a lot with particular types of wine, and we don't always get super specific about the type of meat that we would. And so I thought it would be fun to just kind of focus on something meat-wise that is really stand out about this part of Argentina. And I think, they could just go really well together. So let's keep things moving along, and let's head north to the beautiful town of Mendoza. So this is a university town in the province of the same name and the capital of the wine production and distribution in the entire country. The nearby Luján de Cuyo and the Uca Valley districts are set at the foot of the Andean mountain range between 2,800 and 5,000 meters elevation. A surprising high altitude sweet spot for growing world-class wines, Mendoza produces a lot of wine. Nearly 2/3 of Argentina's wine production come from this province, and some of the wineries in the region produce upwards of 10 million liters of the juice from the grape every year. Mendoza is by far the dominant Argentine wine province, embracing many different regions within it. Central Mendoza has the longest tradition of fine wine, and a high proportion of Argentina's most famous producers are here. The vineyards on either side of the avenues that radiate southwest from the city in the Luján de Cuyo department have developed a reputation for especially fine malbec. And many parts of the region offer unobstructed views on a nice day of the continent's highest peak, Mount Aconcagua. Climbers who have the time can take on the 12 to 18 day challenge of reaching the summit at 22,841 feet, making it the second highest of the 7 summits on every continent around the world. Trekkers who don't want to commit to the trip length or the altitude can spend a day hiking to base camp. Either way, Mendoza is the perfect way to decompress after tackling the many challenges throughout the Andes, whether they're in the Mendoza region or Patagonia or Salta. When arriving into this region, there are lots of wonderful places that you can stay and be outside of the city. Cavas Wine Lodge is, Mendoza boasts one of the world's most charming wine routes, and with beautiful landscapes and a variety of high quality vineyards. On a 22-hectare estate at the foot of the Andes, Cecilia Diaz-Chiut and Martin Rigal have created a splendid Spanish colonial-style hotel devoted to the joys of wine, complete with a wellness center and Moorish-inspired patios. In any season, the Mendoza wine country offers a myriad of activities and attractions that beckon to explore a region famed for sunny skies and nature's blessings. As Adele mentioned, the days in Mendoza are long and warm, and the nights can be really chilly. And this is the perfect place to get out and about in the heat of the day and to snuggle up with a blanket by the fire, sipping one of the world-class malbecs. Cavas Wine Lodge is another RELAIS Chateau property that's really known for its sense of place and its attention to detail when it comes to the cuisine it produces and utilizing resources from the local area. The second property is Casa de Uco. The finest Malbec grapes are grown in the Uco Valley, and this is home to the 790-acre Casa de Uco Vineyards and Wine Resort. The estate is the perfect balance of adventure and relaxation. Days are filled with biking, trekking, horseback riding through the vineyards, and treatments at the Uco Spa. Live and breathe Argentina's wine culture with sommelier-guided tastings and personal chef barbecues, which are amazing, in the foothills of the Andes Mountains. Soak in the views from any of the 16 rooms or 3 new private villas nestled within the vineyards. The essence of the hotel is inspired by the geography, and it's ideal for unforgettable experiences. Lastly, we have the Vines, and it's deeply rooted in the joy of making, drinking, and sharing wine. The Vines Resort and Spa immerses guests in Argentine culture, rustic natural beauty, and warm-hearted hospitality. Feast on inspired regional cuisine created by famed chef Francis Malman and his signature open flame restaurant, Siete Fuegos. Soak up the sweeping views of the Andes Mountains from your well-appointed villa, relax poolside in your private cabana, or learn the art of harvesting, blending, and bottling alongside winemakers. You can get to know the Vine's knowledgeable gauchos, who are your go-to guides, concierges, and sommeliers during your stay. So with that, I would like to welcome our guide for the remainder of our trip to Mendoza, Mark Rashap. Mark is a certified wine educator with Broadbent Selections and was previously the director of wine education for the Wine and Food Foundation of Texas in Austin. He studied Spanish and math at Rutgers University and studied abroad in Spain and had the opportunity to attend Fira de Vi Wine Festival in Priorat. This experience, paired with a bottle of 2000 Finca L'Ermita tasted at the festival, hooked him on wine and ignited his passion for pursuing a career in the industry. He's a level 3 WSET and has a diploma in wine management from a program co-run by UC Davis and Alta Dirección in Buenos Aires. And he previously produced and hosted a weekly radio show called Another Bottle Down. He loves country music and the Delta blues, and he's joining us tonight from Austin, Texas. So Mark, I would like to invite you to unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about Mendoza.
Yeah, well, hey, this is like such a pleasure and an honor, and I'd like to just say hello and thank you to Adele and to you, Kristen. In this time, it's just remarkable how we can connect with other folks, and I look forward to sharing a little story and fun wine with y'all. So yeah, wonderful. Wine is about people and the good things in life. So we're gonna do all that. That's the first time I had heard my bio in like such a long time. It was pretty funny. Yeah, right after college, I graduated college. I had studied 20th century literature from Buenos Aires. So I moved down there with the illusion to get into the wine business. Not the illusion, I mean, it happened.
Yeah.
You know, I studied, yeah, and I have to reflect, like, it's so great to hear the different regions. And Kristen, you know, I agree with you. Like, if you have the opportunity to stay at a RELAIS and Chateau, I mean, it's just unbelievable stuff, and it's just it's incredible. I was kind of a starving wine student in 2003, 2004 in Buenos Aires, but it's all worked out, and the wines are incredible. The people are insanely nice. Actually, Salta is kind of like the Texas of Argentina, whereas like everybody's really prideful and super nice. Everybody there is super nice. So I hope you all get a chance to go and enjoy it. But I have a short window of time, and we want to talk about Mendoza. And I also want to start by correcting a little thing that Kristen said. It is true that the Valle de Uco, where that beautiful hotel is in the Uco Valley, is kind of where all the cool kids are now going and growing grapes, but it's a relatively new region. So there's even this like tiny little crew within the Valle de Uco called Gualtayari, and that's where like all the cool kids are. But actually, it's not where the oldest vineyards in Mendoza are. So the oldest vineyards in Mendoza are from just outside. I can't draw on this map, which I had kind of intended, but just outside of Mendoza, a little bit to the south, you have Luján de Cuyo. And Luján de Cuyo, which is just south of Mendoza, yeah, beautiful, that's kind of like the historic heart, and that's where some of the oldest vineyards are. If we go east from Mendoza, this is just like a whirlwind description of Mendoza. So if you go east of Mendoza, you have what's called the Zona Este, the eastern zone, and that's where more bulk wine is grown. And so that's like not the best. You won't get like single vineyard really cool wines from there, but that's where, like, if you're getting your, you know, cheaper, inexpensive Mendoza wines, then that's probably where some of the juice is coming from. So, and then Kristen, if you go down into that isolated region in the south, that kind of like, that's San Rafael. So that's San Rafael. That's another kind of historic heart, but it's not super relevant. It's the one of the two DOCGs, actually. There's a, or DOCs rather. Is
And
San
explain
Rafael.
really quickly what a DOC is in Argentina.
Yeah, it's actually it's a DOC. So there are DOs, which are like you know, the various regions, but the DOC, the C part is a controlled part, to where the part of the production is controlled, and San Rafael is one of those, and it never took off. Like, you know, it's not like the Italians where they, you know, it's important to have these controls. So it's a little bit of a moot point. Actually, forget I even said anything. But anyway, That's DOC San Rafael. I don't know if it's all that, and maybe Adele wants to chime in and challenge me, but there's not so much of really interesting things coming out of there, but it is an important area for maybe blending and this and that, but I don't see a lot of single vineyard stuff.
I don't really see anything from that region ever either.
Right,
As well.
San Rafael, will you ever see San Rafael on the label? Very little. Yeah. So, but then the Valle de Uco, which is on the eastern side, it's the most high elevation, and like I said, that's where all the cool kids are planting. Now, the winery that we're gonna taste is like old school. It was the first winery to be reviewed by the international press by Robert Parker in the 1970s. It was the first winery to basically be exported. I mean, it was the first winery to garner like international acclaim and brought attention in the 1970s to Mendoza. But they deal with 120-year-old vineyards, 50-year-old vineyards, up to 120-year-old vineyards in Luján de Cuyo, and you don't get that in the Valle de Uco. You get really massively concentrated wines in the Valle de Uco, like really inky black wines. But we're still like exploring those. So I work for the import company, Broadbent Selections. So we import a lot of 45 wineries from around the world. And Bodegas Weinert is the only Argentinian winery that we import. So I hope that explains a little bit of Mendoza. Kristen, you're totally right. Like, it's just beautiful. It's the lion's share of grape growing in Argentina, and it's really leading the charge. There's a lot of investment going on there. I mean, look at it; it's just beautiful. You got the Andes Mountains. You're not as high elevation as in Salta, because as you go further south, so grapes need this very specific window of heat and temperature. So as you're going further north, you're warmer by default because you're closer to the equator. So you have to buffer that warm temperature by elevation. So you're higher up and it's a little cooler. So that's what makes the grape growing in Salta possible. Whereas in Mendoza, you don't have to be quite so high elevation. But anyway, so we are tasting here Bodegas Weinert, first winery to be, it started in the 1970s. When I studied wine, and I was part of a studied wine business in Argentina in 2003, 2004, and I was part of this movement. It was actually all winemakers and bodega owners that were taking this business class, and they were trying to understand how to learn from the faults of the Australians and the Chileans. So, 80s, 90s, Chileans and Australians came in with bulk wine, and the kind of the mentality of the consumers and the American public and the worldwide public, England, Germany, all the major wine markets, was that those are like bulk wine, cheap producers. And so Argentina, they were a little delayed getting into the international market because they had such a strong domestic consumption. The domestic consumption in Argentina is massive. Mm-hmm. And so they didn't have to export to be successful, whereas the domestic consumption in Chile and Australia was very little. So in order to be successful, they had to export. So anyway, that's all saying that like they're relatively new being on the international wine scene. And so, so visiting them, it's like still like a very rustic and beautiful experience. And it's amazing. I was there a year and a half ago, and I can't recommend it enough. So let's go to look at the... Yeah, sure.
Let's talk a little bit about malbec, because it is one of those grapes that can be really polarizing in the wine drinking community, where people either really love it and they're super excited about it, or they absolutely hate it, will never touch a bottle. They write it off the second they see it on the wine list, and especially Argentinian Malbec. So let's talk a little bit about, I mean, this grape has had a huge impact on the country and the global wine economy, just with being, with allowing Argentina to be such a prominent exporter and with global consumption as well. So tell me a little bit about Malbec and where you fall on that spectrum.
Yeah.
And why, whether you like it or not, we should care about it.
Yeah, I mean, you gave like an hour-long question there, and we don't have that amount of time. But
30-second answer.
yeah. I'll try and be as brief as possible. And somebody was saying it's a Bordeaux grape, and that's true. It actually originates in the village of Cahors, and then it was brought to Bordeaux, and because the Bordelais controlled the shipping channel, they actually said, why are we going to ship wines from Cahors when we can just grow our own Malbec and then cut y'all out of the loop? And so they did that. So like Malbec became more of a Bordeaux grape because the folks in Bordeaux didn't want to keep on shipping wines from Cahors around. But then Cahors became a little bit there was a big frost in the 1950s, and then there was a number of factors, phylloxera, which we've talked about, and like a number of other factors that made Cahors like pretty rough. And then meanwhile, Argentina, Malbec came into South America via Chile and through Concepcion, and then this is also a debated topic, but this is the actual truth. It did come in through Concepcion, and then was planted in like the Itata and more so Maule and in that and in the south of Chile, and then made its way over the Andes and was planted in Argentina. And so it's been around for a really long time. But yes, you are correct that I feel like it was relatively new to hit the international scene, and then it exploded. And then what happens is that all of the great vineyards are pretty limited, right? I mean, that's what makes them great. And so when you have a limited vineyard and the market demand is so vast, it's like all of the good stuff got sopped up right away. And then importer, not my import company, but like unscrupulous import companies might be like, oh my goodness, I could sell tens of thousands of cases of Malbec, and then let's just plant new vineyards. Let's plant them in not the best spots. Like, give me some Malbec, put it in a bottle. I don't care. It's going to sell. So bad Malbec made it onto the market. And now that's why we're seeing. So when I was studying in wine in Argentina in 2003, 2004, it was great quality. And then I just started seeing quality dip. And it's just like, it was depressing for me. And luckily, there are old school wineries like Bodegas Weinert, to tie it back in, that have not been the ebb and flow of like the bulk wine versus industry, because there are a lot of farmers, and there's a lot of talk between bulk wine prices or bulk grape prices versus demand, and there's an ebb and flow to supply and demand. And so, but Weinert has always done, they've kind of like had their old vineyards. They don't own any vineyards, but they have long-standing contracts with old vineyards, like I was saying, 50 to 120 years old. Some still use the irrigation method, to where they like open up these like gates and the water just floods in, which is thought of by the folks, the really modern folks who inhabit the Uco Valley, as like completely inferior. But it's like, what is old school is now new and better, and it's like that we can have that debate all day. I hope that answered that question.
Well, the last question, what do you think of Malbec? Do you like it, or is it one of the things you're kind of like, no, not for me?
Yeah, so when I studied wine in Argentina, I was like super infatuated by it, and then I was turned off by it for many, many years. And then I was kind of like of the sort where it's like, okay, I'm going to write off Argentinian Malbec and just think about Cahors or Bordeaux, because there's some interesting single vineyard Malbecs coming from Bordeaux, like somebody was mentioning. But it's again, you have to like trust your producer. You have to trust your wine shop. Obviously, like you should go to Adele and just be like, I trust you to understand my taste and all that kind of stuff. And you should trust the importer. You should look at the back of the bottle and see who's importing and what their flavor is. So
I'll definitely be the first to say that usually like Malbec is not my favorite go-to as well. Like the over extracted, like the cheaper quality ones and stuff like that, that you can just find like on your average shelf in your grocery store, like I think is a bad example of what Malbec could be, the potential for Malbec is. And like, if I have had one on the list, it's usually been from Cahors, France. It hasn't been from Argentina. But every once in a while I'll come across something that like tastes really good and isn't too over extracted, has acidity, has a sense of terroir, and is a really good one. And then I'll put that one on the list by the glass. I think that this blend, it's not 100% Malbec, but the Carrascal blend is, when I smell it, I'm like, this smells like some like really nice Italian wine. Like it has earth and terroir and structure to it. It's very nice.
Yeah.
Malbec, quick story. Malbec was the wine that I ordered when I was in college. And I knew I wanted to be somebody who sounded like she knew about wine before I had any idea what I was talking about. And I think one thing that I've tried to do and especially more so as I kind of pivoted from being in wine to being in travel, was to really appreciate each region for what it is and what it stands for. When it comes to quality wine, when it comes to being a destination, and when it comes to why this wine is important to the local community there. And that's something that, I kind of agree with Adele. Malbec hasn't, I loved it for a while, and I guess similar to you, Mark, I loved it for a while, then I really hated it. Then I kind of got into Cahors, and now I'm trying to, my 2020 resolution since Adele and I started hosting this show together was to let go of my prejudices about wine and to be open to trying new things and different things from regions I didn't know anything about and from grapes that were super unfamiliar. And it's really exciting to be in such a beautiful place and trying some of this. So
hey Kristen, that's a good resolution for life in general, not just your wine interests.
Don't be a snob.
No, but always being open to trying
for sure. Well, Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit?
Yeah.
We only have a couple of minutes left, so why don't you tell us a little bit about what's engraved on, is it a barrel or is it just the entryway? Tell us about
it. It's super hard to like talk about the history of Bodegas Weinert in a short period of time because it's one of the handful of wineries around the world who has a unique microclimate or terroir within their winery, which is insanely important. So like Lopez de Heredia, Chateau in Spain, Chateau Muzar in Lebanon, which we also import, which is
we drank that last week.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, that was our last wine of our show last week.
My goodness. Thank you. So that we import that wine as well, but Bodegas Weinert. But there is such a unique set of bacteria and yeast in their winery that this wine cannot be made in any other winery. So anyway, what makes it unique is that this was an old bulk wine processing facility from the late 1800s. When the Weinert family bought it, they were businessmen. It was a business family who wanted to invest in the Argentine winery or wine industry in the 1970s, and so they bought this like a relatively large building that had a huge capacity. But what they did was they took these cement tanks and they broke them up. They like divided them, so they had an incredible ability to isolate lots, which was really important. So if you see like the bottom photo there, like they have a lot of capacity. They only use about 10% of the capacity. And so they'll ferment in these cement tanks, and then it will go down into the cellars, which is the barrel that you see on the left. And there's over 240 different large format barrels that the wine will age from anywhere. So if we go down, here's the cellars. And so this is like a unique thing, so that you have this Carrascal was aged for 3 years in a large barrel like this. And for this price point, that's relatively unusual. And it's super unusual in Argentina. I think almost any wine would only be 12 months in a barrel, and definitely not this old. And so, but then you have also their higher end stuff, like even the stuff that we don't have in Texas, wink, wink, Adele, it can spend up to 23 years in barrel. So it's like crazy, 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 crazy beans. It's like no other winery does this. Actually, the winemaker, Huber Weber, was a Swiss winemaker that was known for keeping large barrels intact and keeping them cured and working with large barrels, and that was why how he became like the winemaker at Bodegas Weinert. So,
I have a question.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Weinert is obviously not a traditional Argentinian sounding name. What are the origins of it?
Yeah, so German family who came from Brazil. They lived in Brazil for I don't know how many years. I don't know when they came from Germany to Brazil, and then they landed in Mendoza in the 70s.
Okay.
And there's also a large Italian influence in Argentina as well, right?
Hugely, yeah. I mean, in fact, their slang is like based on Italian.
Funny.
So their slang, it's evading me right now, but the porteño slang, which is porteño is from Buenos Aires, is kind of like, it's killing me that I can't remember it. But yeah, there's huge Italian immigrants and Spanish immigrants, which were before that, and then German immigrants from the 20th century.
Sure. And so what would you eat with this wine?
So the reason I love this wine is that it's not over extracted. It's not overly fruity. It's got nice earthy qualities, which comes from the terroir of the cellar. And it's like calling for grilled meats and just, we could say barbecue with the smoky quality. And it's just, it's just calling for grilled meats, and like the parrilla, they call the parrilla, is like the grill that they grill meats on. And so I'm getting hungry from looking at that.
I am too. And it's about that time. So Mark, I do want to open up the floor for questions for about 5 minutes before we wrap up tonight. So guys, if you do have any questions for Mark or for Adele or for myself, I invite you guys to either type them in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask either of us over the audio.
Sorry, it took so. I mean, I was trying to keep it brief, and it didn't work.
You're perfect.
Quick question: for all these amazing road trips and visiting these different regions and towns, what kind of car would you recommend? Do you need like a hardier car to get over some kind of crazy roads in between towns, or convertibles so you can get those amazing mountain views?
So I wouldn't necessarily recommend a convertible because you can be dealing with extreme weather. I think the best way to do it is with a Jeep. Have something big and comfortable, have a good GPS system in there, and where you can really feel like you're a part of that rugged landscape. But Argentina is a place where the buses do travel these roads. There is a big like budget travel network down there where you can hop from city to city within the region through some of these buses. So the roads are made to be traveled. Technically I would recommend something with a 4-wheel drive, but for some of the out and back day trips, you don't necessarily need that. The roads are pretty maintained when you're near these more touristy hotspots, I guess.
And I could weigh in. Mendoza's pretty doable to, at least within, like near. If you go to the Valle de Uco, you probably need a car. But if you're just doing Mendoza, you could probably get around with some taxis and that sort of thing. Eduardo Pulenta is a very famous winemaker, and he's very famous for his motorcycles. So if you're very adventurous, we can't recommend it. But if you're very adventurous, motorcycles might be fun.
Any other questions? Well, thank you guys. I do want to make a quick announcement, or not an announcement. I do want to thank our executive producers for tonight's episode, Julie Pitts and Hugh and Peggy Idstein. And again, I want to thank Mark for joining us as our guest speaker this evening. Then next week, we are headed to Uruguay, which is one of my absolute favorite countries in the entire world. If we were not in a pandemic, I fully plan to be making my way down there now for an extended stay. It is like top 5 favorite countries ever. So most of you probably have no idea about the wine in Uruguay or why you would want to visit there at all. So we are super excited to tell you more about it. And we can't wait to see you guys next week. Have a great weekend. And this episode will be live on our YouTube this Friday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can follow us on Instagram at Talk, Taste, and Travel. And if you didn't see my message in the chat box earlier, our New Zealand episode from August will be live on Monday on YouTube at 4 p.m. So you guys can rewatch it. Have a great weekend, guys. We'll see y'all next time.
Thanks, guys. If anyone's looking for more wine, let me know. I've got a few extra bottles left over from this episode. Or if you are watching this episode, maybe at a later date or something like that too, just send me an email and I can put some bottles aside for you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.